Thanks.
Thanks for reminding me. Someone else did the recording last night. Okay, and then we hope that you might also be able to turn around and train others in your community about this app. That'd be great. So what I'll do first is briefly update you on what's going on with the commission. As you know, Amendment 1 was approved by 2/3 of Virginians in November, and that included passage in all the communities, counties, and cities in the Commonwealth except for one. That one was my own county of Arlington, despite our valiant efforts. The 4 General Assembly leaders appointed 8 legislators, 4 delegates, and 4 senators to the commission on December 1st. The same 4 leaders then submitted lists of 16 or more citizen applicants to the selection committee. And you might know that we had over 1,200 applications from citizens, which was pretty amazing. The selection committee, consisting of 5 retired circuit court justices, met last Wednesday, January 6th. They deliberated and had discussions for about 3 hours. They selected 2 citizens from each of the 4 lists, and that gives us a total of 8 citizen members. I don't know if any of you attended. Those of us who did were pretty impressed with the seriousness and the deliberate discussion that the justices had. They were paying very careful attention to the criteria as established in the statutes that were passed and tried to make sure that there was diversity on the panel. They did, in my opinion, they did pretty well. I was disappointed there weren't more women that they selected, but we do have a commission now, 16 members, 8 legislators and 8 citizens. On or before February 1st, the commission will hold its first meeting, at which time they'll select one of the citizens as its chair. I imagine that they will also discuss how they will manage meetings going forward from that, including scheduling public hearings. There need to be at least 3 in the Commonwealth. I imagine that they will all be virtual this time around. We're not sure yet when the census will drop. I heard recently that maybe March 1st might be the day we might see the census, but I think things change from day to day, week to week, so we'll watch that. So in the meantime, we are encouraging citizens to prepare to submit ideas and testimony to the commission. You can do that via the DLS portal. I'll put the link in there in a little while, and or you can do so at public hearings. So one way to get started in terms of preparing for your testimony is to map your community of interest, which the commission must respect according to the legislation. You can do this on your own or gather friends or neighbors. Would love it if you would share this tool with your church, PTA, civic organizations, or any other organizations in your communities. Tomorrow and Friday, we'll also be presenting another app called Redistricting, which was produced at Tufts University. So it will also give you the option of drawing your communities of interest. So if you can, join us either tomorrow evening or Friday. It's using the same link that you used to get into our meeting today. So what we'll do now is move on to the meat of our session today. And from Princeton University's Representable team, we have Mikala Parnell. Thanks for coming, Mikala.
Thanks for having me. So as Chris mentioned, my name is Mikala Parnell. I am a Princeton student. I'm also the outreach coordinator for Representable. And so I'm really excited to share with you guys what we've kind of created and how it can be used. So the way that I'm going to go through my presentation, I'm going to start off giving you a little information about Representable, what it's for, what communities of interest kind of do. And then I'll show you a live demonstration of the tool itself and kind of explain how you could go about using the tool. And then I will save some time at the end for questions, but also feel free to put questions in the chat. Before I get started, I want to put this link in the chat. It's the link to our educational playlist on YouTube. So we've created quite a few educational materials that you can view on YouTube as well. And if you have any questions, or even maybe after this, you want to kind of refresh your memory on how to use the tool, there's some videos in this playlist that might help you. So I'm going to put that in the chat and then I will get started. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen and see the presentation. It's taking a minute to load. Okay, well, while the presentation loads, I'll give you a little bit of an overview. So like I said, the name of our organization is called Representable, and our goal is to help people to empower themselves and empower their communities by giving them the tools necessary to draw their communities of interest. And in doing this, they're fighting back against gerrymandering. So like I said, what we're doing is we've created this tool. It's a mapping tool. It helps communities get representation through public input processes by allowing them to create their own maps of their communities of interest. This is a free tool. It's an open source tool. And we're really excited to get people on the tool and get started using it. So Representable was built by a team of students, actually, as a computer programming project, but it's grown into a team of engineers, lawyers, policy experts, and organizational partners that all work together to disseminate this information to communities in different states all across the country. And something that's important to note about Representable is that we are in a very close collaboration and partnership with the Princeton Gerrymandering Project, and we work with them very closely to develop this tool and make it effective against gerrymandering. So how we're doing that is essentially we work in now, I think, 13 or 14 states across the country. And we keep working with the product, keep using feedback to make it even better. Working with different organizational partners as well to, like I said, spread this tool to the community. We work closely with these organizations to gather data. Like I said, we're a pretty small team, so we can't spread this tool to all of the people that maybe you guys are connected with in your own communities. So we do trainings like this to really show you how you can use the tool. And then we hope that by going to this training, you're able to take this information and bring it back to your community and begin to use that tool in your community. So the purpose of this tool, so 26 plus states now have legal requirements to respect communities of interest in redistricting. So that means that the communities of interest that are drawn by community members on Representable can be used directly by commissions or by legislators, map drawers, or even by organizations to submit public testimony, public input, and that they're required to be considered in the drawing of the map. So it's a direct pipeline to many commissions and many legislators who make these district plans. So as of right now, or before Representable, there was really not a working way to collect this community of interest data to get to map makers. And so our goal in creating Representable was really to make a really easy and accessible tool that allows people to map that data. And so we do that using a very easy standardized digital format to enable better public testimony. And we also empower organizations to use this tool to collect that data and then create their own Unity maps that they can also submit to commissions and to map makers. So this is just a little information about redistricting in Virginia. I feel like Chris has already pretty much covered everything on this slide in the overview, but I will mention that one thing that's important to know is that Virginia does require the consideration of communities of interest. So the maps that you create on Representable are required to be considered in the process of redistricting. So now I'll talk a little bit about how communities of interest can help address the problem of gerrymandering. So this is maybe a pretty familiar example for the people on this call, but in Virginia, there's the county, Prince William County, Virginia. It's Virginia's only majority minority county. It has a substantial Latinx community. And in proposed state legislative district plans, this county was split up 5 to 8 times. So obviously this is a community that maybe has a lot in common. Maybe they consider themselves to be very similar, or maybe they consider themselves to be different. We don't really know how they would draw their own maps, but we do know that when not given the opportunity to necessarily give their own public input, their community was split up quite a few times. And this is just a quote from the NAACP President Ralph Smith, which says, "This plan effectively disenfranchises the Prince William County, and they were concerned that the minority voice would be lost in the drawing of this map." So the goal of Representable is to fix this system and fight against this system with data, right? So when you say that this is my community and you give it a place and you give it a name, that forces these legislators to really take note of you and your own personal community. And when they do that, it kind of prevents these kinds of things from happening by essentially forcing them to focus on and take note of where you consider your community to be and the types of interests that your community has. So I'm going to go ahead and give a live demo because I think that the best way to understand how Representable works is to get onto our website itself. So I'm going to share our website. Hopefully when I switch screens, you'll still be able to see. Okay, so this is the Representable website. And again, this has a bit more information, but mostly what I just shared with you about Representable's goals and how it fights against gerrymandering here. Something that you can do here is go ahead and get started drawing the map. I'm going to take you through drawing the map just as a general user today, but it's also important to note that the League of Women Voters Virginia has actually created a community mapping drive. And what that means is essentially a community mapping drive is like a box that all of the maps can kind of be collected into. And if you wanted to submit your map to the League of Women Voters Virginia's community mapping drive, you would use their link and go to their homepage first. Their homepage on Representable first, and then you would follow this exact same process to create your map. So I know Chris has the link to that mapping drive and we'll probably share it today, but I just wanted to make note of the fact that if you wanted to submit directly to the League of Women Voters Virginia, you would see a slightly different homepage before we got started with the actual map making process. Okay, so I'm going to get started and show you guys what it would look like to draw your map with Representable. So click and get started here. You're first going to land on this bit of a landing page. It's just going to tell you a little bit more about what you're doing on this website, also how gerrymandering can maybe affect an individual and how it kind of silences their voice. So this is, here you're going to select the state that you want to draw your map in. Representable is fully functional in all 50 states, so any of these states works perfectly fine to create your map. However, I'm from North Carolina, so I'm going to use North Carolina as my example just because I know that community best. And of course, Virginia is an option as well. So when you click on any of the states, it's going to take you to the states page. This is going to tell you more information about redistricting in that state, the criteria of redistricting, and then how communities of interest can be used in the state. So this is for North Carolina. It's obviously a bit different than Virginia. We're not quite as advanced as you guys as far as redistricting yet, but this information would be specialized to the individual state that was chosen. Okay, so now we're going to start the actual mapping process itself. First, it's just going to ask us for a little bit of information. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my name, put in an address, click next. Next, this is going to tell you about what a community of interest is. So something that is important to note here is Representable has actually recently gone through a bit of a redesign. And in doing so, we really focused on the educational aspect of redistricting and what redistricting means to people. And so we really wanted to highlight the more of the educational aspect, more of the learning aspect of redistricting. We know a lot of people maybe don't know a lot about it. Maybe they've heard of it, but they're not sure what communities of interest even are or how they can be used. So that's something that we really like to highlight through our website. We also have added, and I'm going to show you this really quickly, under this Learn More section, we've added a frequently asked questions section as well as a redistricting glossary. And again, these are just materials that are helpful for people who are maybe new to this to get some more information about redistricting before they get started or if they're just curious. So this page here is going to tell us more about what a community of interest is, if maybe you're not sure. The definition that we have here is a community of interest is a geographic area that shares cultural, historic, or economic interest, and that communities of interest encourage the drawing of fair voting districts. We also have a few examples of things that maybe you could consider when you're drawing your community of interest. And this page is really to help orient the user to kind of think about what it might be that they want to, what they might consider their community to be before they get started with the mapping process. So I'm going to go to start. This next page here is something that's very unique to Representable, and that's the survey page. So this survey page is going to allow you to kind of think about your community, orient yourself to community, and also justify why you chose the places that you did. So many public testimony or public input processes do require you to have some type of description or explanation of your community. This can serve as that explanation, but also this is helpful when you go to the actual mapping tool to have some idea of the kinds of things you might want to consider your community before you get started with the actual mapping process. So as you can see here, there's 4 different categories that we're looking at: economic and environmental interests, community activities and services, cultural and historical interest, and then community needs and concerns. All 4 of these categories have examples here. And also, if you click on them, you can see that we have some guiding questions in case you're not really sure what this might mean, and also some more examples. Something that's important to note on this page is that you only have to respond to one of these boxes. So you can fill out all 4 if you want to, you can just fill out one, but it is helpful in creating that map. So because my community is in North Carolina, I'm going to try to just explain a little bit of how maybe I would go about creating my community. And again, these are just examples from my own personal experience, but you could put anything in these categories that you felt was relevant to you and your community. So to start, I'm looking at economic and environmental interests. Some of the guiding questions here are: where are the residents employed? If there are environmental concerns in your community, what are they? And then we have some examples here. So for me, I live in Wilmington, North Carolina. So I live right on the beach on the coast of North Carolina. So because of that, an important industry in my community might be tourism. Additionally, there's a lot of small businesses in my community. I know they're really active around the summer because that's when the tourists are there. Some other important parts of my community is that the hospital and medical system, as well as big companies like GE and PPD, are really big employers in my town, and they hire a lot of people. So maybe those are the kinds of things I would include in my economic interests. And so I would just go ahead and put that in the box here. My next section is asking me about community activities and services. So this could be where people gather, where they socialize, and then also just how and where your community accesses different types of services, right? So for me, maybe I would want to include my church. My church is one of the biggest churches in my community, so I would maybe include that. I know that a lot of people shop and hang out around the mall, Independence Mall, and they're visited frequently. Longleaf Park is maybe something I would include here. It's a big park that's a very central spot. It has a lot of outdoor activities. Maybe I would include some of the major schools or the school even that I attended within my community. And then again, my community is right next to the beach. So there's a lot of local businesses that are near the beach. So I could include all of those things in community activities and services. I'm going to fill out the cultural and historic box, and then I will explain the last community needs and concerns box really quickly. So cultural and historic interests, these can be a lot of things about cultural bonds, maybe religious groups, ethnic groups, certain languages, certain ages, any types of shared history. So for me, something that's really interesting in my town is that there's a lot of different age groups. A lot of people come to Wilmington to retire, but also we have a college, UNCW, which brings a lot of younger college students. So there's a very wide variety of ages. So maybe that's something I would want to highlight in this section. And then finally, this community needs and concerns box. I'm not going to fill it out for you today, but I am going to explain why it's important. This is actually a new box that we've added recently, and this is really allowing the user to think about what politicians or map drawers really need to know about their community. So maybe there are certain voting issues that are really important. Maybe there are certain problems with redistricting, like maybe your community was split up before in the redistricting process and now you really want them to pay attention to it. Maybe there's social services that are missing. For example, maybe you live in a medical desert and there aren't very many hospitals nearby, or a food desert and there's not a lot of grocery stores. Whatever issues, maybe there's environmental issues, whatever is like really a important salient issue within your community, policy-wise, or any of the potential needs of your community can go in this box. And we think that this box is really helpful, especially for map drawers and for organizations, because it does allow them to justify their community further, and also allows them to know what it is this community, what values or problems this community aligns with. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead to the next section, which is going to allow me to actually draw my map and explain to you guys a little bit about the map tool. Before I do that, I'm going to name my community, and I'm going to name my community College Road Community, because that's the road that kind of goes through the entire section of my community, but you can choose any name. Okay, so this is the mapping tool, and this looks a little bit different. We've updated the mapping tool since the last time actually that I've spoken with the League of Women Voters Virginia, but we've made it even easier and more simple to use. So here you're going to see, start off with this box. It's going to tell you a little about the units that we're using, which are census block groups, and then it's going to have this search bar. So you'll notice that this is very similar to Google Maps in that you can just search for any location. For me, since I mentioned that I live by the beach, I'm just going to search the beach to start. and it's going to zoom right in on where the beach is. So it's very easy to move around. You can just drag around. This also has, we also have full mobile capability. So if you're on your iPad or if you're on your phone, you can still use this tool very easily. The way that you would go about creating your map is these highlighted things are census block groups. And if you want to select one for your map, you would simply click. If you want to get rid of it, you just click it again and it goes away. You can zoom in, and as I zoom in, you can see some of the landmarks are already being highlighted. For example, this is University of North Carolina, Wilmington, which I mentioned. And over here, this is Longleaf Park, which is another thing I mentioned when I was creating my community. All of these things are visible, but if for some reason you didn't see a landmark that you did want to include or that would help orient your community, you do have that option by using the bar.
Some great ideas in the photo galleries.
Okay, so I'm going to go explain these things up here at the top, and then I'll draw the community in there. So clicking on this box here,
Could you all make sure that you are muted so we can hear Mikala? Thank you. If you have any
Thank
questions.
you. So clicking on the community information box, you can see here that it's allowing me to see the information that I typed in on the survey section if I want to refresh my memory. You can also see it's counting the community population. So as I click boxes, click census block groups, it is, oh, sorry, I made a gap in my community. It is actually counting the population and it will total it up for me. There's not actually anyone who really lives back here, so it's not very big population. But as I click on more and more block groups, it will total up that population for me. It's also important to note that this mapping tool does have one limitation, and that is that your community has to be contiguous. So it has to touch no gaps within your community here. So just keep that in mind as you're drawing. If for some reason it's not letting you draw, that's probably why. So if I zoom in, you can see this street here that actually is the street that I named my community after. This is College Road right here. And a lot of the things that I mentioned are actually right along the street. So here's the University of North Carolina. Here's Longleaf Park, which I mentioned. Here's my high school. So as I'm going through, I'm just kind of noticing things that maybe I want to include. Over here's the mall. Here's the medical center, which I mentioned hired a lot of people. And I can click on these things and kind of move around the map until my community contains everything that I want to include. I see that there's a question that says, where's the population zone? It's up here in community information. And you'll also be able to see it once you finish your map and save it. If you had any questions or maybe you were confused, having issues, this question bubble here is going to show you a video that tells you a little bit about the map. And we also have some questions in case you're confused or you're not sure what to do next. So I'm going to zoom out so you can see kind of what my community is looking like so far. It's kind of like a blob here. You could also use these streets to maybe find places that you wouldn't include in your community. Like for example, I would say that my community probably stops around where this Carolina Beach Road is. Once you pass this street, you're into a whole different beach area and you're also into a different school zone. And so maybe I wouldn't consider past this road as part of my community. So you're just kind of orienting yourself to the map and selecting groups that way. So I'm going to zoom out again so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. You can select a pretty good amount of block groups. At some point, it will stop you from selecting block groups, but it's very unlikely you'll get to that point. Most people's maps tend to be about 6 to 10 block groups in our user trials, as we found, and you can select quite a few more than that. You could select half of North Carolina if you so chose. But once your map is kind of the way that you want it to look, maybe something like this, once you've kind of made it the way that you think best represents your community, you can go ahead and click Save. Go ahead and agree to these terms. And then submit your map. So again, I just want to highlight that normally if you were submitting your map to the League of Women Voters Virginia's mapping drive, once you click submit, it would go to their drive, but you'd also still be able to see all of the this page and still see your map. So it would still save in your account, but it would also go to the League of Women Voters mapping drive. So I'm going to show you just a little bit about of what it will look like once you finish completing your map. And so this is actually my favorite part of the redesign that we've done, is making it much, much easier to save and share your map with other people. So once you finish submitting your map, you're going to get a few bubbles here, as you can see. So this first one is allowing you to export your map as a PDF. This is basically like a way to print out your map. So it's going to have your map, it's going to have the community information, any demographic information or population information, all of that's going to be printed out right on your map. And then you can print it, you can share it on social media, you can email it, you can do whatever you'd like with your PDF. The second bubble is allowing you to export it as a GeoJSON file. This is a mapping file, so if you downloaded it this way, you'd be able to upload your community to mapping software like Maptitude or Dave's Redistricting app. So if you were interested in trying your hand at drawing maybe a district, you could upload your community of interest or even multiple communities of interest using the GeoJSON file, and then try to use those to create a district if you so chose. And then this final option here is to send an email. When you go to this website, I didn't do it, but you would create an account. I was already logged in, so I didn't have to create an account, but you would be able to send yourself an email. We would use your email address and send yourself a copy of your community, and then that email would be able to be shared with anyone that you so chose. So I'm gonna exit out of this box here. Oh, sorry, I just got a call and it refreshed everything. So just going over, this is the page that you would see once you finished your map. It's going to zoom in on the map that I drew. So this is about what the map that I drew looked like. Here, you're able to look over it. Something fun that you can do on this page is you can actually kind of play with the map itself. So for example, if I want to see how postcodes intersected with my map, I would be able to do that. Or if I want to see state house districts, and you can see these are the districts that are drawn, and then this is where my map is. This feature kind of just allows you to see how existing geographic boundaries play with your map or interact with the map that you drew. Additionally, if you go to this demographic section here, you're able to see the population data. And once we get the American survey data, you will be able to see more demographics here as well. And then finally, this is again the way to export your map. You can export it as a GeoJSON, as a PDF, or as a CSV, which is kind of like an Excel file that would print out all of the information that I just explained. And then finally, you can see the types of community information included here that you put in. So this is the entirety of Representable from the point of view of a user. Now I'm going to briefly show you what it would look like for an organization, just if you're curious, and then I will take questions. So as I mentioned, organizations have what are called community mapping drives. These are, like I said, collection boxes for maps. So if you were to submit your map to a community mapping drive, you would receive a link somewhat like this one. This is an example of a community mapping drive that we did in Greensboro. This is not the link that is for the League of Women Voters drive. That one has been shared in the chat. But essentially, you would go to this link and then you would be able to follow all of the steps that I just mentioned to create your map. However, once you submit your map, if you're curious as to what happens when you submit your map, essentially it goes to one big drive that looks something like this, where the organization has all of the maps that they've collected in one place. I'm going to zoom into Greensboro because that's where this community mapping drive was held. So all of these all of these maps were sent to this community mapping drive. You're able to see them all together and how they interact with each other. We're also able to see the survey information that was included for each map here in this community mapping drive. And this allows organizations to really look at the data, each map, and then also if they so chose, they could export these maps as a GeoJSON, which is a mapping file, and they could create Unity maps based on the communities of interest that they receive. So this is where it goes when you send a map to the League of Women Voters mapping drive. Okay. So next I'm going to go over just a few frequently asked questions, and then I'm going to open it up if there are any other questions. So these are the FAQs. So one, what are next steps if your organization decides to use the tool? So we already know that the League of Women Voters Virginia has decided to use this tool. But like I said, you can go to the YouTube playlist that I sent out in the chat earlier, and I can send it out again at the end of this meeting and look for information. You're also welcome to email team@representable.org if you have any questions or further concerns after this after this webinar that maybe you weren't answered in the webinar. Additionally, we have quite a bit of information on the website. Like I mentioned, we have the Learn section that you can learn more information about the site. And we're in the process of putting even more resources on the website, which will hopefully help answer any questions that you may have. How is Representable different from other mapping softwares? So Representable is unique because it's it is the only tool, free tool that focuses solely on drawing communities of interest. It's also the only tool that organizes these community maps, that has mapping drives to organize community maps for organizations, and the only one that structures these questions before drawing the map, such as economic interest and community activities. We're the only people that really take in that survey information and help you to kind of think about your map before you draw it in that sense. And then finally, our biggest priority as Representable is really the friendly user interface. We make it as easy as possible to draw your map and as accessible as possible to all sorts of users from all kinds of different backgrounds. And we're also very malleable. So if there's any problems or concerns, like you're dealing directly with us, the team, and we really just want to help you to figure out how you can use Representable in your community. This is the next one, we get this one a lot, is how will this tool be affected by the delay of the release of the census information? Representable is fully functional right now, so you can map your map today. If you so chose, you can make a community of interest today. Once we get the census information, we will update the census block groups, which is the types of groups that you use to create your map. But we really expect a very small change. And the reason that we actually chose census block groups, one of the reasons is because they're one of the least changed units from census to census. So we don't expect it to be very different from one to another. And then again, because any maps that are drawn now will still be completely accessible, even with the change in the census data, all of the previous maps before that change will still be valid on the website. And because we don't actually rely on census demographic data when people draw their communities, the tool won't be affected by any delay. So probably you won't even notice the difference from when there isn't census data to when there is, but there will be no delay between receiving the census and the website being ready to use. Finally, what mapping systems are compatible with Representable? I mentioned this a little bit in the tutorial, but basically you can upload a GeoJSON file of your communities of interest into several mapping systems. And I've included some here, including Maptitude, Esri, and Dave's Redistricting app. And then I know District Builder is a very popular one, and that one is implementing a feature that would enable mappers to use the communities of interest as well. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to put this email on the screen, but if you have any questions and concerns that we don't answer today, I am going to leave time for FAQs today. But if you didn't get your question answered for some reason, you can use this email, team@representable.org, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can with answers to your questions. Okay, so now that I put this up here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then take any questions that we may have about the tool.
Okay, I know one person asked, is it Hishan or Hayshan? Do we have to wait until census data is incorporated before we start playing around using this tool? I think you sort of answered it, but.
Yeah, absolutely not. So you can start using the tool today if you so chose. It's fully functional right now. And I encourage you actually to go on the website and play around with it and see kind of how it works and how you can map your own community before you start sharing it with others. But there will be no delay when the census comes. We'll just update that information, but it shouldn't affect in any way anyone's previously drawn maps or the maps that they would draw after the census is available.
Okay, maybe I can explain a little bit to answer some of the questions. So your community of interest map is not the same as what the commission is going to be drawing. So they'll be drawing delegate districts, which I think have around 80,000 people per. And then the state Senate districts, I think, have 200,000 in that area. I don't know what the congressional districts are. You'd have to divide by 11. The community of interest, so each district might have a bunch of communities of interest in the district. And so they have to pay attention to the population, but I don't think the COIs need to have any specific population. Is that correct, Mikala?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're drawing your community of interest, it's typically a pretty small group. Like I said, most communities of interest tend to be around 6 to 10 census block groups, which is much, much smaller than a district would be. So this is really like more your immediate community. Your actual district will probably be composed of quite a few communities of interest, all put together in one district. That's another reason that the survey information is so helpful, because it tells map makers how they can use your specific community of interest, how it interacts with other communities around you, and maybe helps them to determine which ones should be in a district together as opposed to which ones should be in separate districts.
Okay, Diane asks, if our goal is to have our county not cut up into a number of districts, but rather a single House or Senate or congressional district, would you simply draw your map to cover the entire county?
That is a good question. And I think this is up to the user in a way. You definitely have the capacity to draw the entire county. But we would say that the goal of Representable is really to allow you to define your own personal community as opposed to already existing boundaries. For example, map makers already kind of know which counties exist in the state. So that's not really new information for them. However, if it was something that was really important to you, that you really wanted to see your county in one district, then that's something that would be really great for that community concerns and needs section to include, like, this is my county, and I think that our county shares these traits and should be put together in the redistricting process. And last time we were split up. So that's definitely something you could mention as something that's important to your county.
Okay, I think we answered the questions that were put in here. If anyone wants to ask a question, or if I missed your question in the chat, you can unmute yourself, I think, and just ask on.
I have a question.
Yes, Helen.
Does it help? Like, so our community is totally broken up, and if we're trying to sort of get our city back together, does it help to have lots of different people submit the same community of interest map? Does that play a part?
Well, we don't know what the commission will do,
So,
but
I mean,
it makes sense
okay,
to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that something that you could do is, if you know that your community is typically split up, the more people that you get this tool out there to, the more maps that you can collect. And I think that when you start to see a lot of maps are overlapping, a lot of people consider their community to be the same. Maybe they've put similar data in the survey information. Then map makers are more likely to take notice of the fact that a lot of people have identified this as their community, and they think it's really important that this is one community put together. So I think that by spreading this tool to members in your community, if you know that it's typically has been split up and maybe it shouldn't have been, it does empower community members to have more of a voice as they kind of band together in creating their community.
And so is the best way for us to do that is through the League of Women Voters, what do you call it?
That they call it mapping drive. It's like a collection folder.
So that's the best way to submit it. It's just, and then the league will submit it to the commission. Is that?
Yeah, we can collect it, but you don't have to collect it in the league's folder. And there might be a state, let's say if the NAACP for the state wanted to get all of their local chapters involved, they might create their own. But you can also use it, print it out yourself. You can email it to yourself, I think,
Right.
and then submit it with a statement to the commission. So you can, as an individual, do this,
Right.
either in writing or testimonial, at the hearings.
Right. Thank you. That helps.
Okay. For how long will Virginia Redistricting Commission accept our COI information? Is there a deadline? And the question again, the answer again is, we don't know. So I think because this is so different from what they've done before, we're everyone's kind of trying to figure out how this is going to work. As we said, the commission has its first meeting on or before February 1st. You can start submitting testimony now if you want to, because the DLS site has a portal. I'll put that in there too. The commission has to decide how and when they're going to have their hearings and how and when they're going to collect any other testimonials. So we kind of have to wait for them to let us know. Does anybody else have something different to share about that? And when is census data supposed to come out?
Yeah.
Another, we don't know, right?
We're not sure when census data comes out either, but we can say that we're keeping our eye out on it. And once it does come out, we'll be updating the site pretty immediately. So no worries there, but we do not know when it's supposed to come out. It's rumors of delay, so we'll see.
Other questions?
Yeah, I just got back.
Hi, do you have a question? So here's the DLS website. And they actually, I'm sorry, I'm starting to cough. They have a portal, I think, where citizens can just type in a statement. There were some that were submitted to the selection committee before they were meeting, talking about what they thought they should, consider while they were choosing the citizen members. So whatever you put in there, I think all the commission members will see. That's the main way. I understand that according to law, we are not supposed to contact individual commission members privately, that you need to submit it to the entire commission. So.
I'm seeing a question in the chat here, how this tool is similar or different from the Tufts University tool. So that's a good question. And I know that you guys are having a few webinars also on Districtor. And I'll just explain a few of the differences that I've seen. And then also you can always attend those meetings, I think Thursday and Friday, to find out more about the tool and the differences. So both Districtor and Representable do allow you to map your community of interest. We have different ways of going about this. So Districtor allows you to map more things. I think you're allowed to map your community of interest, but you could also map your district. So Representable is the only tool that focuses solely on communities of interest. And the reason that we do that is because we want to make the tool really easy and user-friendly. That's another thing about Representable. Our focus is really user interface. So as you're going through it, the steps are really clear, easy to follow. There's definitely more functions on Districtor, but I think that because of that, it may be a bit harder to use if you're not familiar with map tools already. But I think maybe that might be a personal opinion. Additionally, something that's unique about Representable is that we are the only tool that offers that survey section. So we're asking you specific questions about your community and allowing you to justify your community. This is something that's helpful if you want to submit your community as public testimony, because it's helpful for map makers to kind of take into account why you drew your community the way that you did. And then Representable is, again, focused specifically on the educational aspect of redistricting. So we actually do include information about redistricting, what it means, the glossary section. We also include information about redistricting from state to state. And all of that type of educational information is specific to Representable. Another thing that's specific to Representable is the organization mapping drives. So we allow organizations to collect maps all into one drive. I don't think that Districtor has that functionality. From what I understand, I believe that all of the maps that you create on Districtor would then be individual maps. So you wouldn't have the option to put them into one collective. So hopefully that answers that question. And then I have another question that's about, once a COI is created, can you go back and edit as new information is obtained? This is a really good question. So it's kind of a yes and a no, in the sense that you can't edit a map that you've already created. So once a map is created, you wouldn't be able to edit it specifically. However, you're allowed to make as many maps as you want, and you can view any of the maps that you've created. So if for some reason new information came about and you wanted to remake your map, you'd be able to create a new map, you'd be able to review the map that you made previously for reference, and you'd be able to delete the old map in favor of the new one if you so chose. So while you can't directly edit a map that you've already created, it's pretty easy to make a new map and reference the old one. And all of the maps that you created would be saved within your account. So if for some reason you wanted to even draw multiple communities and then come back and reference them, they would all be saved in your account, and you would be able to do that as well.
So if you wanted to get information about the Districtor tool, again, we're going to have that training. You can use the same Zoom link from today. You can go to our league website to actually register if you want to do that. So tomorrow is Thursday, and that training will be at 7 p.m. And on Friday, we'll be having the training at 12 noon. So you can pick whichever time is better for you.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go ahead and put the YouTube playlist in again if you want to refresh your memory or on the educational tools. And then I'm also putting our email in the chat. So if you have any other further questions that weren't answered, please feel free to send an email to that email in the chat, team@representable.org.
Anything else? I'm going to put in one more link, and this is for Dave's Redistricting app, which was, I think, mentioned earlier. It's compatible with this tool, but the League of Women Voters National has offered a little bit of brief thing. If you want to go there, I find that interesting because you can go and see the population breakdown and the demographics for each congressional district or House district. And if you wanted to really play around, you can actually try creating your maps for the entire Commonwealth. And they'll show you how your districts are breaking up in terms of population, ethnic breakdown, I think political, lots of different things. So it's sort of an interesting, it's the actual mapping tool is what it is. It's not just a community of interest, but so someone,
Absolutely.
because you were asking population questions, you can take a look there. They'll tell you what populations are. And actually VPAP, I think, just had a, I don't know if you're familiar with VPAP. They have lots of different graphics, but they showed how different the populations are for the different districts from the mean, what it's supposed to be. So some districts, because they've gained so much population in the last 10 years, are way bigger in terms of population than they should be. And then there are districts that have lost population, so they're very much under. So they are going to have to shift the districts around to try and balance them more. So I think that's going to be interesting to see. So any other questions that we can answer? Well, we're really pleased. Thank you, Mikala, so much. I think we've learned a lot, and hopefully a lot of you will go and start playing with your communities of interest and maybe start creating some.
Great. Well, I'm glad that I was able to speak here today. And like I said, if there are any questions, further questions, please feel free to reach out.
I'll stay on for a few minutes if anybody wants to hang on with another question, but thanks for joining us. And we'll let you know later, basically on our YouTube channel, you'll be able to find the recordings.
So Chris, is the thinking that we and the League would work with other groups in our communities to identify communities of interest?
Yeah, I'm going to try and reach out here in Arlington area to some of the groups that I know and just, bring them, let them know this is something you could be doing with your group. For example, in Arlington, we have some historically Black districts, that go way back. And the one that's near me, I know they're split between two House of Delegates districts. And they might be interested in telling the commission, we have so much in common. Please keep our community together and not split us between two different delegates. So I'm going to see if they're interested in that. So you can do the same too. Civic federations might be interested in doing that because they are geographically organized anyway. And I know one of our senators is Barbara Favola in Arlington. And she used to be mostly Arlington, but now her district stretches out through Fairfax County all the way into Loudoun County. There are only 6 precincts in Loudoun County that are in her district. So one of our members is in one of those 6 precincts. So she says, they don't see or hear from her that often because number one, it's farther away and she only has 6 precincts. Whereas in, other Fairfax and Arlington, she has dozens. So I would think they would say, we belong more with this community. Anyway, those are, different ways that people can work around it and use it.
Thanks.
Can I ask a administrative question?
Sure.
Let's see.
Answer.
Can you send the information that you've put out in the way of links in the chat room? Can you send that to me by email because I have a very tiny iPad here and I'm not able to.
Yeah, we'll put that all together and we'll share that with you. I think there's going to be a response after this is over that'll go out. And there was a link, I think, to a Drive folder that had some materials in it. So we'll put it in there too.
Okay, that'd be great. Good.
Then do we have, if you want to put your email in there, I can try and make sure I send it to you. Or
Email-
can you tell it to me?
My email is my L as in Linda, S as in Suzanne, B as in Boatman, and the word painter, PAINTER, at gmail.com.
Was it LSB, B as in boy? Okay.
Yeah. And at gmail.com. And
Got that. Okay.
I'm with the Westmoreland County Democratic Committee. So, you know, we're out in the country. And we suffer from the business of being split up like most of the districts are. They're not one whole county, just, you know, maybe parts of 11 counties, like our Senate district. So, and we never see the Senate.
Population.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll be sharing this with the rest of the Westmoreland County
Great.
Democratic Committee and see if the NAACP has their own mapping drive, et cetera. So this is good. Thank you.
Great. Okay, anybody else? And I will stop our recording and Mikala, I guess that's it.